Good morning and welcome. You're watching Market Cafe on ET Now. I am Harsh Saita and with me is Ankita Saxena. End of the week, Ankita, and to break this down, on this show we take you through all that's happening in global markets as well as what are global news talking about, global business news, as well as domestic news, and then we go stock specific on domestic stocks and the stocks you need to look out for through the trading day today. But let's start off with that first piece, the global markets. Ankita, talk to us about how US and Europe fared yesterday.
Absolutely. Good morning to you, Harsh, and good morning to everyone. It's Friday, last day of the week. Stocks performed pretty decently yesterday. US markets closed higher amid volatile trading yesterday as investors remained concerned about the path of the Federal Reserve's rate hikes. And Dow Jones gained 108 points. Nasdaq Composite rose 0.7%, and all the major averages, however, are headed for a losing week. Now, the S&P 500 is down more than 1.5% through Thursday and is set for its worst week since December 16th. The Dow Jones is down nearly 1.9% this week and is also headed for its fourth straight losing week, and the Nasdaq is down 1.6%, more than 1.5%, and on pace for its second negative week. And the Fed has been a focal point for investors this week since the rollout of its latest meeting minutes, and a rather hawkish commentary coming in there. And policymakers also indicated that inflation remained well above the central bank's 2% target. Now, investors as of today are awaiting the January data on personal income and consumer spending that's likely to come out today. That's an important inflation number that everybody will be watching out for today in the US markets. Let's look at the European markets. Now, European markets closed mixed. The Pan-European Stock 600 closed largely flat, but 0.1% higher in the green, was largely flat. DAX was up 0.4%. FTSE was in the red, down 0.2%, and CSE was up 0.25%. So a mixed set of numbers coming in. Rolls-Royce rose sharply, up almost 20% after beating the analyst expectations. So that was a stock that was pulling the index up. So that was a roundup of US and the European markets. Harsh, take us through what the crude is looking like on Friday.
Well, crude extremely volatile across the board. We're looking at a slight gain now on crude and a couple of factors there. And before I talk about that, let me mark out the numbers for you. WTI currently sitting at $76 a barrel. Brent sitting just below that $33 a barrel mark. So that's where crude currently is at. Excuse me for that. And, very quickly speaking, the reasons for a bit of a spike. So, one piece of that is that the Russia production cut is expected to be larger than 500,000 barrels per day. It's expected to, in fact, now go all the way up to 25% of Russia current production. Of course, the war escalating matters and not helping either. So that's currently in focus from a crude perspective. The other piece is that the dollar index has fallen below 104, which obviously aids crude prices. So those couple of factors moving in favor of crude. What's moving against is the fact that there's been an inventory buildup in the US. So we've seen US inventory or stockpiles rising by 7.6 million barrels versus the 2.1 million barrels that most analysts expected. So a couple of those factors playing around, but crude therefore has seen a bit of a spike. But all these factors will move and drive crude going forward.
And well, we'll stick to global news. JPMorgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon said that containing inflation remains a work in progress for the Federal Reserve. Now, he said that the Fed has lost a little bit of control of inflation, and Dimon himself said that he expects that interest rates could possibly remain higher for longer, as it may take the central bank a while to get its goal of 2% inflation. Now, his comments came one day after the Fed released the minutes from its January 30th to 1st of Feb meeting. Now, which showed, of course, the members that they remain resolved to fight persistent inflation.
Right. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said the United States would resume economic talks with China at an appropriate time. Beijing continues to sell its vast stock of treasuries as Washington warns against possible sanctions violation in relation to Russia. Yellen said there are many areas where the US and China need to work together to address global challenges, including food security, debt, and climate change.
And Yellen also made a strong pitch for increasing financial support to Ukraine to help its battle the year-old Russian invasion. Yellen was speaking in Bengaluru at a G20 meeting. She also said that US is looking to strengthen sanctions on Russia.
In the coming months, we expect to provide around $10 billion in additional economic support for Ukraine. Since the early days of the war, we've partnered with a multilateral coalition of over 30 countries to impose severe economic costs on Russia for its brutal assault. Our twin goals are to degrade Russia's military-industrial complex and reduce the revenues that it can use to fund its war. President Biden has said, we will stand with Ukraine in its fight for as long as it takes. We commend our allies for stepping up their direct assistance, and we believe it's critical that the IMF move swiftly toward a fully financed program for Ukraine, as they've said that they will do.
Now we'll have Srinjoy Chaudhary join us with more details on this one. Listen in.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen believes that the sanctions on Russia have worked. And if they have worked so far, they should continue, which is why there could well be additional sanctions on Russia for attacking the Ukraine. And the war has gone on for exactly a year and a bit. Now, what is the result of the sanctions? The Americans believe that the Russian budget deficit is terrible and things will only get worse, which is why, yes, there will be further sanctions on Russia, and there should be an attempt by the IMF, by other international agencies, to help in the reconstruction of the Ukraine. Now, how that will happen and when that will happen will naturally have to be worked out. But at this point, the Americans are making it very clear that the IMF has to step up and has to help in the reconstruction of the Ukraine.
And we're moving on, FTX co-founder Sam Bankman-Fried was hit with 4 new criminal charges, including ones related to commodities fraud and making unlawful political contributions, in a super spreading indictment filed in New York federal court. The new charging document lays out in greater detail Bankman-Fried's allegedly fraud conduct related to his cryptocurrency exchange FTX. The 12-count indictment also provides new details of hundreds of political donations that he received.
Let's switch over to Netflix. Netflix has said it has cut prices of its subscription plans in some countries. The streaming giant looks to maintain subscriber growth amid stiff competition and strained consumer spending. When the company's stock, though, nearly fell 5%, underperforming the broader market and on course for its worst day in more than 2 months. The past year has seen intense competition in the streaming industry as a pandemic driver boom fades.
And the Biden administration has nominated former MasterCard CEO Ajay Banga to be the next president of the World Bank. The nomination will kickstart a confirmation process. Before that could take weeks before a final decision by the World Bank's board. Remember, the World Bank president is almost always an American citizen nominated by the United States. Biden said in a statement that Ajay Banga is uniquely equipped to lead the World Bank at its critical moment in history. Biden also added that Banga has spent more than 3 decades building and managing successful global companies that create jobs and bring investment to developing economies and guiding organizations through periods of fundamental change.
Right, something definitely each of us as Indians ought to be extremely proud of, with the ex-Mastercard CEO being nominated for that position. But with that, we'll slip into a very short break. More on the other side. We'll switch over to the domestic front.
Welcome back. You're watching Market Cafe with me, Ankita Saxena, and with me is Harsh Saida. Let's quickly move on to news coming in on the domestic front. It's that time of the year that industries and the employees await keenly. Yes, it's the appraisal season. So how much, at least Harsh and I are definitely waiting for it. So how much wage hike can you expect as an employee, and how much budget will you need to allocate if you are an employee? And an employer, sorry. This report by Aon gives you a sense of what to expect. Now, my colleague Sumita is here to break down the highlights of this survey. Let's take a look.
It is the increment season, but is it all gloom and doom everywhere considering recessionary headwinds? Maybe not if you look at the Aon Salary Survey 2023. Now, according to the survey, salary increments are going to happen in the range of 10.3%, slight dip over last year. Last year the range was 10.6% for overall all the sectors. But one would wonder, what's leading to so much of optimism that salary increments are going to happen in a double-digit range? Well, Aon has a couple of explanations for this. India is emerging as a bright spot, especially when you consider the G20 group of nations. It is going to be the fastest growing economy. Secondly, domestic demand is decent, and of course, improving labor market conditions. Now let's come to the question of which sectors will get the best hikes. Well, it's mostly technology and knowledge-oriented sectors. So you have technology and products which will get the biggest hikes at 12.9%, despite doom and gloom and job cuts. Then, of course, e-commerce will get salary hikes of 12.2%. Then there are global capacity centers, technology consulting services, and of course, financial institutions are also not so far behind. But the big one worry that's coming out of this report is that attrition is pretty high this year. Attrition is going to be at 21.4% vis-a-vis 21% in 2022. So one would wonder, if there are such big recessionary concerns all around, why would people want to quit? And we did see some trends like the great resignation crisis, then there was quiet quitting. Well, Aon says that more and more people are now venturing into entrepreneurship. Their attitude towards work is changing, and most of them are also interested in gig jobs or gig work. But going forward, as we can see from the report, it's attrition basically which is going to be a key concern for organizations going forward. So how can they control that? While yearly increments are not going to be enough, they'll also have to have some off-cycle increment engagements, some holistic reward strategies as well.
Right, and while on the backdrop of that, India is all set to get a brand new social stock exchange through the NSE. What does this mean for India's growth? That's what Vikram has tried to simplify and explain yesterday. Take a look at what he has to say.
Now, India is set to get a brand new social stock exchange, and this through the National Stock Exchange. What exactly does this mean for India's growth? And that's exactly what we are looking to explain today. The National Stock Exchange has received the approval from the Securities and Exchange Board of India, SEBI, to set up this social stock exchange. The exchange is going to function as a separate segment from the 22nd of December 2023. But what is the purpose of this new stock exchange? Well, non-profit organizations can now list on the National Stock Exchange and raise funds. It's in line with the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman's vision to create an exchange for social enterprises and voluntary organizations to raise money for their causes. Now they can raise funds through equity, through debt, and through mutual funds. The not-for-profit organizations, they would issue these zero-coupon, zero-principal securities to raise funds, the ZCZP securities, like we know them. So what are the intricacies of raising funds through this exchange? At present, the prescribed minimum issue price is 1 crore rupees, and the minimum application subscription size is 2 lakh rupees. So according to the National Stock Exchange, trading is not permissible in the ZC, ZP kind of category when it comes to bonds, but it can be transferred for other purposes, such as the transfer to legal heirs. So, another question is, who is eligible to raise funding through the social stock exchange? Well, this exchange identifies non-profit organizations and for-profit organizations as social enterprises. To be recognized as a social enterprise, organizations need to demonstrate that 67% of their activities have targeted underserved or less privileged population segments or even regions that have recorded lower performance in the development priorities of either central or state government. So this brings us to the other big question: who can invest in these instruments on the social stock exchange? So as per the NSE circular, institutional and non-institutional investors can invest in the securities issued by the social enterprises, while retail investors, they are allowed to invest only in securities issued by for-profit social enterprises. Foreign investors are currently not allowed to invest through the SSE. While this is still a new concept in India, many countries like the United Kingdom, like the United States, Brazil, Canada, they already have such investment platforms that have helped social organizations raise funds. And India too is hoping that such platforms can help bring in investments to social enterprises.
Well, with that, it's time for us to slip into a short break. You don't go anywhere. There's lots more action coming up right after. Welcome back. You're watching Market Cafe. It's that time of the show where we take you to the news for the hearing impaired.
मेघालय और नागालैंड में आज और चढ़ेगा चुनावी पारा। पीएम मोदी करेंगे दोनों राज्यों में रैली। शिलांग में होगा रोड शो। बाकी दलों ने भी झोंकी ताकत। आज मध्य प्रदेश के सतना में होंगे गृह मंत्री अमित शाह। शबरी माता जयंती पर आयोजित कोल जनजाति के सम्मेलन में शामिल होंगे गृह मंत्री। बेंगलुरु में आज से शुरू होगी G20 देशों के वित्त मंत्रियों और केंद्रीय बैंक के गवर्नरों की बैठक। केंद्रीय वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण करेंगी अध्यक्षता। खजुराहो में G20 संस्कृति कार्य समूह की बैठक में भी आज कई सत्र होंगे अहम चर्चा। भारत के CAG गिरीश चंद्र मुर्मू को चुना गया अंतर्राष्ट्रीय श्रम संगठन का बाहरी लेखा परीक्षक। 2024 से 27 तक रहेगी जिम्मेदारी। रूस यूक्रेन संघर्ष का 1 साल पूरा। संयुक्त राष्ट्र महासभा में पारित हुआ शांति प्रस्ताव। रूस से दुश्मनी समाप्त करने और यूक्रेन से अपनी सेना वापस लेने का आह्वान। भारत का महिला T20 वर्ल्ड कप के फाइनल में पहुंचने का टूटा सपना। ऑस्ट्रेलिया ने सेमीफाइनल में टीम इंडिया को 5 रन से हराया। आज इंग्लैंड और दक्षिण अफ्रीका के बीच होगा दूसरा सेमीफाइनल मुकाबला। और युवा निशानेबाज अनीश भानवाला ने काहिरा में ISSF विश्व कप में रचा इतिहास। 25 मीटर रैपिड फायर पिस्टल स्पर्धा में जीता कांस्य पदक। और अब सभी खबरें विस्तार से। मेघालय और नागालैंड में चुनाव प्रचार का आखिरी दौर चल रहा है। सभी राजनीतिक दल यहां जोर शोर से अपनी पार्टी और अपने प्रत्याशियों के लिए प्रचार में जुटे हुए हैं। लेकिन आज दोनों ही राज्यों में चुनावी पारा और चढ़ने वाला है, क्योंकि आज पीएम मोदी दोनों ही राज्यों में चुनावी रैली करने वाले हैं। लिहाजा दोनों ही राज्यों में सुरक्षा के पुख्ता इंतजामात किए गए हैं। पीएम मोदी सबसे पहले नागालैंड के दीमापुर में रैली करेंगे। इसके बाद मेघालय के शिलांग और तुरा में उनकी सभाएं होंगी। भाजपा उम्मीदवारों के समर्थन में शिलांग में एक रोड शो का भी आयोजन किया जाएगा। एनडीपीपी और बीजेपी ने नागालैंड में 2018 का चुनाव साथ लड़ा था और गठबंधन के सहयोगियों ने पिछले साल जुलाई में इसी समझ के साथ आगे बढ़ने का फैसला किया था। बीजेपी ने मेघालय की सभी 60 विधानसभा सीटों पर अपने उम्मीदवार उतारे हैं। वहीं मेघालय में कांग्रेस और टीएमसी ने भी पूरी ताकत झोंक दी है। कल एक रैली में टीएमसी नेता ममता बनर्जी ने कहा कि बंगाल पूर्वोत्तर का प्रवेश द्वार है, कोई भी असुविधा होगी तो टीएमसी उनके पास होगी।
And well, with that, it's that time of the show where we get you all the stock-specific news. And for that, we have in the studio, twinning in green, Lisa and Vamakshi, who look pretty optimistic about the markets today. Lisa, first up, you have all the stock-specific action. Tell us what are the stocks that we need to keep an eye out on.
Well, surely, Ankita. Good morning to all. Starting with Alchem Lab, the US FDA, they had received an EIR for their Indore facility, which was inspected last year in July. In response to that, the company had submitted a detailed plan of action, and the US FDA inspection has now been closed. Moving on to Z, following the insolvency proceedings against Z, NSE has removed Z Entertainment from the F&O segment. West Coast Paper Mills, in view of the discussions between the management as well as the trade union, the illegal strike of contract workers has been called off, and the production at the paper and paperboard division has restarted now. The company suffered a marginal production loss owing to this. Sanofi has reported their earnings, and the revenue was down around 2% on year-on-year basis. However, the PAT was up 46% and stood at 131 crore. Talking about the dividend, they have recommended a final dividend of rupees 194 per share as well as a special dividend of 183 per share. Kanoria Chemicals have been setting up a new formaldehyde plant with 300 tons per day capacity at Ankleshwar, and it will be with the latest metal oxide based technology. It will cater to various sectors such as engineering, wood, and also it will cater to the domestic as well as the export regions. Lastly, on Axis Bank, they have updated on the purchase of City India's business, and they have mentioned that both the parties has made progress on the integration, and also they have been they have received customer approvals for the same. The estimated possibility date of completion of the acquisition will be by March 1st, and this is within the 12-month timeline that was indicated earlier. So these are the stocks that will be on investors' focus today.
Right, thanks so much for that update, Lisa. We'll quickly go across to Vamakshi. Vamakshi, you've been going through all the brokerage notes. Talk to us about what you feel is important.
Well, absolutely. Starting off with Axis Bank, which is the sector that you actually track closely. So Morgan Stanley has actually come out with a note on it, and they believe that the proposed City acquisition by Axis has been progressing well in line. Management is in fact expecting likely completion by March 1st, 2023. Now they're positive on a structural turnaround of the Axis Bank franchise, and they're expecting ROEs to be over 16% by FY24 and 25. On the back of that, they're also expecting that the valuation is appearing to be quite attractive, and given all these positive factors, they've gone ahead and maintained an overweight rating on Axis Bank, given a target price of 1,200 per share, which actually implies an upside potential of nearly 42%. NMDC is the next stock on our radar. We have a note that is coming in from Motilal Oswal, and they believe that iron ore is prepping up for a rally. They also believe that NMDC is well placed to capitalize on the growth opportunity ahead, which is why they've given a buy rating, a target price of 155 per share, and that actually implies an upside potential of over 30% from the market from the closing price yesterday. And lastly, we will be watching out for Thermax. We have a note that has come in from Kotak, and they believe that green utilities are showing signs of sharp business scale up. Long period of growth is seen ahead for green utilities, and increasing share of products as well as service orders are likely to improve the margins going ahead as well. So a lot of positive factors for Thermax, which is why Kotak has maintained its buy rating, given a target price of 2,470 per share, which actually implies an upside potential of nearly 15%.
All right, thank you for all that stock-specific lowdown, Lisa and Vamakshi. And now we'll quickly move on to news coming in from Mahindra Lifespaces. Mahindra Lifespace developers have named Amit Kumar Sinha as the managing director. Listen in to what the management had to say about this development.
We wanted to make sure that we were transparent with all our investors as to where is this business going. What is our view on this business as a Mahindra Group? That was a primary objective of this call, to introduce Amit as well. You're right about the past, and that, all of you are in. It is what it is. There are many things about the past that, or in fact, not many things. There's everything was What we can tell you is what we feel about where we are today and what we feel about where we are going from here. And with the leadership team at Lifespaces today and with Amit coming in as CEO, I would tell you that personally, and in many ways, I sit with you as the Mahindra Group is an investor in Lifespaces. As an investor, I feel very comfortable about where this company is and where this company is headed with this management team.
Well, yes. The other piece that's come across is my colleague Aishwarya spoke with Piyush Bansal, who is CEO of Lenskart. Okay. He says that he sees the number of people requiring eyewear going up and shared the plans for the company going ahead, especially after the acquisition of Owndays. Listen in.
See, the TAM is very high because there are almost half of India that needs specs, and that number is growing to almost 70-80%. So I don't get into these numbers of market size, etc. All I know is that 500 million plus people need glasses. So that number is growing, I think.
In terms of startups, there's a lot of chatter about funding winter. There's been a lot of layoffs in the startup scenario. What is your sense, the VCs, from an investor's perspective? Why is that happening at this point?
See, I think, of course, we have seen people had some made big predictions after COVID, especially online businesses. I think a little bit of that sentiment bets didn't play out, but it'll correct over time.
Okay, you've taken Owndays. You've acquired Owndays. So, what is your outlook for this year? Also, are you planning to take on any other overseas brands? Which other markets are you planning to address this year, or probably in the?
Well, we are largely focusing on India, and we have Owndays, so we have a lot to do. So nothing new right now.
Any further plans to reach out to other markets?
No, we're just focusing on India, Southeast Asia, Middle East. That's it.
And one of the stocks that's been in focus is Precall after Minda bought 15% stake of Precall. Now, we also spoke to Vikram Mohan, MD Precall, listening to what he had to say about the company's roadmap.
The promoter group of Precall, represented by me, stands committed to stay vested in Precall, grow Precall, and create value for all of our stakeholders. My management team, consisting of Ganesh, our CEO and Executive Director, our Director Technology, Amir Dastagir, our Director Strategy, Siddharth Manoharan, and CFO, Priyadarshi Bastia, stand committed to leading this organization along with our respective teams in the coming years to take it to greater heights and greater glory. PHI holds a 5.73% stake in the company, to be precise, and they have endorsed our present management and have assured of their support, and they will continue to stay vested with the company for the short to medium term.
Right, that was of course the management of Precall. With that, we're completely out of time on this edition of Market Cafe. Thanks so much for watching. From Ankita, myself, as well as the whole team that puts the show together.